Imagine a scenario in which there is a train coming. On board there is one passenger. Let's call him
Larry.
There is also a lever. Up ahead the tracks split. On the left track we have
James.
and he's tied up to the rails. On the right track there is
بوب قمر الدين دبيازة، خالد كشميري، خضر كرويتة، إسماعيل أحمد كنباوي، عثمان عبد الجليل ششة، محمد سنبل.
and they are also tied up. Now, unless Larry pulls the lever, the train will continue on its predetermined path, killing the 5 kittens. If Larry does pull the lever, the train switches tracks, saving the kittens, but leading to the tragic demise of James. Now, swap James for millions of people, swap the kittens for billions, swap the tracks for ideologies and the train for a
destruction by nuclear war.
And just like that, you've created the entire moral foundation of Zack Snyder's 2009 superhero movie, Watchmen.
Jesus Christ, Henry! Why the hell didn't we get a launch detection?
I am, of course, talking about the trolley problem. The famous moral dilemma that asks whether sacrificing one life can ever be justified if it saves 5. The problem itself isn't really about finding the correct solution. Its real purpose is to reveal our moral instincts when we are placed in extreme, no-win situations. And Watchmen takes this idea and dials it up to 100. It presents a version of the trolley problem on a global scale, where each major character represents a radically different moral answer to the same impossible choice.
Why does one death matter against so many?
I triggered it 35 minutes ago.
In this scenario, Larry pulls the lever. The 5 kittens are saved, James is killed. And at first glance, this might seem like the most logical, even moral option. The choice that results in the least amount of suffering. Larry, in this case, is practicing utilitarianism, the ethical framework where the right action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
The world will survive, and it deserves more than you've been able to provide.
If Larry were a character in Watchmen, he would be Ozymandias, the billionaire and masked vigilante Adrian Wade. When presented with the trolley problem on a global scale, Wade chooses, almost without hesitation, the utilitarian solution.
15 million people killed by Dr. Manhattan himself. The world's punishment for flirting with World War III.
His logic is simple, cold, and precise.
Killing millions
To save billions.
And on paper, the equation works. But when the problem grows this large, when it affects not just individuals, but entire cities, nations, and ultimately the whole planet, a decision of this magnitude requires a profound detachment from humanity, and therefore from the very people utilitarianism claims to protect.
I've made myself feel every day. See every innocent face I've murdered to save humanity.
And yet that claim reveals the paradox at the heart of utilitarian logic. To make such a decision, human beings must first be reduced to numbers. And the consequences of that detachment don't end with the explosion. The aftermath of this choice doesn't only scar the dead, it reshapes the survivors. In this case, utilitarianism may fail not simply because of dehumanization, but because it may not even achieve the greatest good in the long run. By proving that such atrocities are acceptable as long as the numbers work out, it risks ensuring the repetition of the same dilemma. The survivors inherit a peace
based on a lie.
and a world where human life has been proven expendable.
No! You haven't idealized mankind, but you've deformed it. You've mutilated it. That's your legacy. Soon there will be war. Millions will perish in sickness and misery. Why does one death matter against so many?
The second choice presents an entirely different response. Larry refuses to play by the rules of the problem altogether. This position is rooted in Deontology, an ethical doctrine built on the belief that some actions are simply wrong, regardless of the consequences. For a deontologist, the answer is simple.
Because there is good and evil must be punished.
In this case, Larry is essentially Immanuel Kant in a trench coat. He acts according to his own categorical imperative, the moral rule stating that one should act only according to principles that could become universal laws, even when those principles are as simple and brutal as
Men get arrested. Dogs get put down.
For Rorschach, morality is not about outcomes. It's about principle, duty, and remaining true to one's moral law.
Never compromise. Not even in the face of Armageddon.
The lever becomes a test. Pulling it would mean actively killing someone, even if doing so would save millions. And that would simply be unacceptable. So the only option left is to remove oneself from the equation entirely. Because in this case, even silence is a form of participation.
We were meant to exact justice. Everyone's gonna know what you've done.
So Rorschach would rather die than live in a world built on a lie. Rather be erased than violate his own moral law.
Of course you must protect life's new utopia. What's one more body amongst foundations?
But this form of absolute morality has its own dangers. Because a rigid adherence to principle can become inhuman on its own, blind to nuance, mercy, and consequence.
We don't do this thing because it's permitted. We do it because we have to.
Because in a society that is defined by collective outcomes, preserving one's conscience may come at the cost of abandoning everyone else's.
Now the whole world stands on the brink, staring down into bloody hell.
Moral certainty then turns into moral superiority, and responsibility is replaced with judgment.
And all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll whisper, "No."
What happened to the American dream? What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at me.
The third option is, of course, the most brutal one. Larry deliberately decides to let the trolley run over the kittens. And this choice demands that Larry actively practices nihilism, the belief that life lacks any objective meaning or value, and that morality faith, and social structures are ultimately arbitrary.
It's a joke. It's all a fucking joke.
From this perspective, the lives of 5 mean no more than the life of 1, and saving anyone becomes pointless if...
Ain't nothing gonna matter once those nukes start flying while we dust. That Ozymandias here. You're the smartest man on the sender.
Larry here becomes the comedian. The man who kills, rapes, brutalizes, and even murders his own unborn child.
No.
To a nihilist, the dilemma itself dissolves and becomes a justification.
You know, mankind's been trying to kill each other off since the beginning of time. Now, we finally have the power to finish the job.
But even a life lived as cynically and nihilistically as this can have its limits. A person can practice nihilism all day long, but when it is no longer James on the tracks, but millions of people, and when the choice of the lever is placed directly in the hands of the nihilist, the justification for the murder of millions suddenly start to mean something.
You know, I thought I knew how it was. I thought I knew how the world was.
Suggesting that this form of nihilism is more of a coping mechanism that collapses the moment reality demands consistency.
I done some bad things. I did bad things to women. I shot kids. But that was fucking war. This... I never done anything like this.
So even those who claim to believe in nothing can be broken by absolute evil.
Man goes to doctor, says he's depressed. Doctor says treatment is simple. The great clown, Pagliacci, is in town. Man bursts into tears. But doctor, I am Pagliacci.
You could have turned the gun into steam, the bullets into mercury, the bottle into goddamn snowflakes, but you didn't, did you?
God help us all.
The fourth and final option is, of course, to do nothing. This position reflects a deterministic view, the belief that all events and therefore all choices and decisions are caused by prior conditions. From this perspective, the choice to push or not to push the lever may be nothing more than an illusion of free will.
Everything is preordained.
Larry is no longer a mere person here. He becomes the godlike entity known as Dr. Manhattan.
I never said the Superman exists and he is American. What I said was, God exists and he is American.
Determinism could look at the trolley problem and say that the tracks are already laid. If one of the two outcomes is already predetermined, intervening would only prolong the inevitable.
A clock without a craftsman. It's too late. Always has been. Always will be.
Dr. Manhattan is, of course, an exaggeration of the deterministic worldview. But his character exists to prove something unsettling. That even someone who can see all possible futures and outcomes cannot easily choose between them when the future is placed directly in his hands.
I can change almost anything. But I can't change human nature.
And even if determinism on this scale were 100% true, even if...
You're all puppets, Thorny. I'm just the puppet who can see the strings.
We can still be morally responsible for our actions. Inaction is still causation. If everything would be predetermined, then the refusal to push the lever becomes part of that predetermined chain.
If you'd cared from the start, none of this would have happened.
The recognition of the strings may not be enough to excuse letting tragedy unfold.
Without condoning or condemning. I understand.
The trolley problem has no perfect answer, and Watchmen never claims that there is one. Instead, it forces us to confront what different people and different ideologies are willing to do when faced with impossible situations. It also forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about us, that we often trivialize ethics until the stakes become too real to ignore.
That's the real practical joke.
So maybe the real challenge about the trolley problem isn't choosing the correct track, but undermining the problem altogether. Making sure no one is tied to the rails, putting safety brakes on the trolley, and not placing Larry in situations where he has to choose between killing one or killing 5. Because no matter the choice, however justified it may seem, however necessary it feels, there is no outrunning the consequences.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Tonight, a comedian died in New York.